Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 107 of Show For You, where today we'll be going over episode 1060 of One Piece, or the One Piece anime. Now, this episode starts off with everyone just kind of looking around, and as we get kind of back onto the actual giant pirate ship, everyone's like, yo, where did the crew go? Where's the Sunny? Did it sink? And ultimately, they're like, oh, well, the Straw Hats are like, yo, we don't gotta stop, we don't gotta keep looking for them. If they got somewhere, they're safe. The Sunny's not that type of ship to sink so easily. And, and just that, that they will be fine and that everything is good. And they also need to get to Elbaf because they've ran out of food on the giant ship. Yeah, so then we go to the perspective of the Straw Hats, where we see is once again they punch through the wall, just kind of, well, as Luffy punches through the wall with his partial gear fourth, and we see is ultimately they get out and they land in this big snowy area around a castle, and once they get out, Cat actually ends up running away from him, and they start looking around, and they see these massive trees and everything. We see as Sanji has to give up his cloak because Nami's cold, and complaining a little bit as per usual. But yeah, so we see as everyone's looking around, they're like, yo, this is Elbaf! And they ultimately end up seeing this long bridge. And it's like a big old, like, it's not a drawbridge, but it's a swaying crap. What's the term for it? Like one of those bridges that have like not perforation, but partitions between the logs each step. I'm not gonna be able to remember it right now, but yeah, it's one of those bridges. And we see as they plan to go across it, but then they see as it starts shaking, and they see silhouettes in the background, and it is two giants. It is Gerd and Goldberg. Now they hide from him because they're like, "Whoa, we need to be quiet." And Luffy's like, "Oh, giants! No, shut up, Luffy!" And we see as Gerd and Goldberg are talking to each other about going and finding Roto, who is the sun god. That is Roto. And they're talking about him and how they got to go over there to him for stealing the Straw Hats and all of that, and how he's done wrong, and how they aren't a big fan of him. He's kind of a creep, but he's a great navigator, so that's why they actually have him on the crew. So yeah, we see as Gerd and Goldberg walk by, and Sanji sees Gerd, and he's like, "Oh, they got giant women!" But yeah, he freaks out, and Nami ends up getting both Luffy and Sanji's heads down in the snow. Like, shut up! But yeah, so then they progress along a little bit more, and they walk on the bridge, and I hate this theme so much in Elbaf, but Chopper has become nothing more than a glorified like mode of transportation, because Nami's always just having him transform into his deer form, and her hopping on the back, and Chopper doing all the movement. Like, I hate this because Chopper used to have so much aura. Like Monster Point pre-time skip. Oh my gosh, pre-time skip Chopper. There we go. But yeah. So pre-time skip Chopper in Monster Point, which is had so much aura. Like imagine like when he's crawling up in his lobby and it's just a beast. But now he's just a cart essentially. Yeah, so we see as everyone's crossing and all of that, getting along by their own ways. Usopp's freaking out. He literally cowers in the face of a big snowflake, or a mountain of snow at least. And as they're getting across, Luffy hears a massive roar, and he's like, "What the heck is that?" And then it goes to a panel of, and he asks Zoro if he felt that, and he goes to this sick panel. It absolutely will be the thumbnail of Loki. It's like so cool. It kind of reminds me of like when Kaido was in his hybrid form when they were on during Rooftop Piece, and they have like that panel where it's like blacked out and all it is the glow of his eyes, but like his aura and like surrounding are kind of like illuminated in a way. It's really cool. So yeah, like I said, that would probably be the thumbnail because that was a sick panel. Man, he's like, "Yo, did you hear that?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, I don't know what that could be." And they look down beneath them, and all there is a bunch of wolves, and they're like, "Oh, I don't need to fall." But yeah, so ultimately Luffy's like, "Yo, I'm gonna go check this out." So he's like, "See y'all," jumps off the ledge, and they're freaking out. And they're like, "Luffy, there's wolves down there." Buddy, this is the sun god, and we're worried about him seeing and getting eaten by wolves. Pal, this dude was fighting beasts this size, or at least of similar nature, when he was a child. I think he'll be fine. But yeah, so he goes running off to go search for where that roar was sourced from. Oh, I've already kind of spoiled that, but yeah. He goes search for it, and as we're going about, we get back to another perspective of the people on the giant cruise ship, where we see as Robin is reading the newspaper and is revealing to the crew how the big news Morgan was spreading libel everywhere again, because he was stating in his newspaper, or the World Economic Journal, World Business Journal. But yeah, So we see as he states that Vegapunk was killed by Luffy and them, and how the giant pirates and the Straw Hats raided Egghead rather than them being there to help with it. And they didn't even really raid. They weren't really there to help with it. They were just like, that was the next step along the way. And they just ended up there and got roped into everything. But yeah. So we see this, and we see as they read off a little bit more, just discussing everything. And we also get to see how all the Straw Hats, which is convenient because these Straw Hats are all ones who aren't a part of the original crew besides Chopper. And we see as they notice in Luffy's form, because they're talking about the pictures that the World Economic Journal takes, and they notice how when Luffy's in his Gear 5 form, he has a mark, an X mark on his arm. And that, I love how they don't notice and don't realize what it is, because they weren't there for that. That was when, in Alabasta, I'm gonna have to turn around for this, when all of the Straw Hats put the X mark on their arm, because that's what they did to reveal that they were the actual Straw Hat members, because that was when Bon Clay was a threat and he could transform people's faces, so they had the X marks on their arms to show that they were the real ones. And when at the end of the arc, they all raised their arm up like this with the X mark on their forearm, and yeah, that's from that. So that's why they don't know it, because they weren't there for that. Only ones that were there for that were Nami, Usopp, Sanji, Zoro, Luffy, and Chopper. So yeah, that was just really cool. I love that little detail. But yeah, so they just get into talking a little bit more. They get to talk about Elbaf, and they talk about Haruden a little bit, and we actually get to see a little bit of Haruden. He's in the forest fighting some beast thing. And I love how they get Haruden's quads right, because in the manga, Haruden has massive legs. Like, bro's legs are defined. And they got him right in the anime, so I was glad to see that, because there's a panel recently in one of the more recent chapters of the manga where Haruden's thigh looks like monstrous. Bro is built. That was really cool to see. But yeah, so we see that, and they get to talking, and then they also get to talk about the accursed, I think they call him the accursed prince. I think that is the title. And you're talking about the big man himself, who committed unspeakable things, killed his father for power, ate the devil fruit of Elbaf. And we see, as we get to Luffy's perspective, and they're still kind of discussing all these horrible monikers and stuff like that, and it pans around, and we get to see Loki in his chained form sitting there, and immaculate. That was literally one of the best introductions we've seen in all of Elbaf. Because after this, we also get a full description of Elbaf, because Loki then starts describing it to Luffy. He's like, "Who are you?" Luffy's like, "Yo, I'm Luffy. I'm gonna be king of the pirates." And he's describing Elbaf and all that. We get to see pans around. We get to see the big sword, and we get Elbaf, and that was so sick too. That was a combination of two of the best introductions of all time. That was a great introduction to both Loki and Elbaf. But yeah, so we see this, and ultimately they start yapping it up a little bit. They don't really start yapping it up a little bit. They just kind of yap it a little bit more, and ultimately it just kind of ends there, because Loki is going to tell Luffy some story, some ball knowledge here in a little bit. But yeah, so we just kind of see them talk a little bit more, and that's where the story ends. Not the story ends, but the episode ends. Yeah, great episode. I don't know what it is. I feel like it's pacing, because yes, they're only doing one chapter per episode, but it's still so good. Because I remember when I was watching Egghead, because I'd already read all the manga for Egghead by the time I watched Egghead, and the second half of Egghead seemed so slow to me. Even though I was really enjoying the Gorosei fight and stuff like that, it was still slow, and Kuma's backstory just obliterated the pacing for me. However, Elbaf, it's going. Even the slow episodes they still have things to enjoy about them. Either it's animation or cool little details like that. But yeah, this episode didn't have much going for it besides Loki's introduction, but it was still sick to see that little panel with the X mark and all of that. And yeah, so it was just really cool. I really enjoyed this episode, and I cannot wait to see what all gets adapted in the next episode. So thank you very much for watching, since that's all I really have for episode 1160 of One Piece, and all I really have for episode 1,107 of Show Review. So yeah, once again, thank you very much for watching.